when the president aimed at heaven. Nobody had a script for this one. Politicians fight politicians, presidents clash with journalists, judges, generals, foreign leaders, and occasionally their own reflection. But nobody, not in modern memory, not in the playbook anyone was working from, had a protocol ready for the morning a sitting American president woke up, opened his phone, and decided the next name on the list was the Pope. And nobody had a protocol ready for what happened when the Pope decided to respond. The post that changed the conversation. It started on Truth Social, the way so many things do now. Fast, unfiltered, and built for maximum impact at minimum cost. President Donald Trump called Pope Leo XIV terrible, weak on crime, a disaster for foreign policy. And then, as if that wasn't enough runway, he added the specific allegation that the Catholic Church had only elected Leo in the first place because they believed it was the best strategy for dealing with Donald J. Trump himself. Read that again. The theory, stated plainly, was that one of the oldest institutions on the planet, the organization that has outlasted every empire, every plague, every political revolution for 2,000 years, had selected its spiritual leader based on a calculation about how to manage one American president's second term. The Vatican did not immediately respond. The internet, however, did not wait. Within hours, the posts were everywhere. Memes, threads, split-screen comparisons, people asking whether this was real or whether they had accidentally clicked on a parody account. Catholic Twitter exploded. Cable news producers scrambled. Anchors who had thought they were walking into a standard Friday news cycle found themselves staring at chirons they had never imagined typing. Trump calls Pope weak on crime. And somewhere inside that whirlwind, Pope Leo XIV was deciding exactly what he was going to say back. The man on the other side of this fight. This was not just any pope, and that is important to understand before anything else. Pope Leo XIV, Robert Francis Prevost, born in Chicago, the first American ever elected to lead the Catholic Church, had barely finished settling into one of the most powerful and sacred roles on earth before finding himself in the middle of a public fight with the president of the country he was born in. He had already made it clear during his earliest days as pontiff that he saw his role through a specific lens, not political, not partisan, but not silent either, not when the questions being raised were ones the Church considered moral rather than merely strategic. His January speech to visiting diplomats had already drawn the attention of the Pentagon. Conflicting reports emerged about an unusual meeting between American military officials and Vatican representatives, a level of institutional friction that suggested this tension had been building quietly long before anyone started posting about it publicly, and now it had broken the surface. The war in Iran, rising conflict, the sharpening language coming out of Washington about military options and strategic pressure. And on Easter Sunday, Pope Leo standing at the most visible pulpit on earth and saying, with the full weight of his office and the full clarity of his voice, "Blessed are the peacemakers." That was the line Trump responded to. That was what drew the words weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy and very liberal. That was how it started, what he said back. The room where it landed was already charged. Reporters and analysts who had been covering this escalation for days were watching closely, phones ready, expecting one of two things: either careful diplomatic distance or a measured ecclesiastical rebuke dressed in language mild enough to diffuse the situation. What they got was neither. Pope Leo, when asked directly about the criticism coming from the White House, did not reach for cover. He did not deflect. He did not wrap his response in enough theological language to make it disappear. He looked at the question. He paused, and then he said what he actually believed. "I do not look at my role as being a politician. I don't want to get into a debate with him. I don't think the message of the gospel is meant to be abused in the way that some people are doing. Then, I will continue to speak out loud against war." The room processed it in silence for a moment. Because it was not what anyone expected, and it landed harder than it should have. And the reason it landed harder is worth understanding. He did not insult Trump. He did not match the tone. He did not lower himself to the specific battleground where the original attack was waiting for him. He simply described what he saw happening, the gospel being weaponized, peace being treated as weakness, and then stated, without flinching, that he intended to keep going. It was the spiritual version of a calm person refusing to be dragged into a screaming match. And in a media environment built entirely around escalation, that refusal was genuinely disorienting. The audience in the middle here is the number that gives this story its real weight. Over 50 million Americans identify as Catholic. That is not a rounding error. That is not a niche audience. That is a major cross-section of the American electorate. And it includes people at every level of the political spectrum, in every region of the country, in every income bracket. It includes people who voted for Trump. It includes people inside his administration. When the President of the United States calls the Pope weak, he is not insulting a distant foreign figure operating in a separate universe. He is saying something that lands in the living rooms, the Sunday morning pews, the dinner table conversations of tens of millions of his own constituents. The Vatican ambassador was summoned or requested a meeting, depending on which version of the conflicting reports you follow. The State Department was involved. The Pentagon had already been in contact. This was not a Twitter feud between two people who would never actually face each other. This was two institutions that already have formal diplomatic relationships, already communicate through established channels, already occupy overlapping territory in the lives of millions of the same people. And they were now in open conflict. That overlap is what made it impossible to laugh off. Two completely different theories of strength. What this fight revealed more than anything else was the collision of two completely irreconcilable ideas about what strength actually looks like. On one side, the belief that strength is expressed through offense, through speed, through making sure the other person is always on defense and never gets comfortable, through dominating the news cycle, winning every visible exchange, and treating any sign of restraint as an admission of weakness. This theory has a logic to it, and in certain environments it works, because it keeps opponents unsettled and supporters energized. On the other side, the belief that strength is expressed through consistency, through refusal to be pulled off message by provocation, through holding a position that does not shift depending on who is watching or how loud the pressure gets. This theory is slower and quieter, and in the short term it is easy to mistake for passivity, but over time it builds something different, a kind of credibility that doesn't depend on winning every news cycle, because it isn't playing the news cycle game at all. Pope Leo XIV had been doing the second thing from the beginning. His message had not changed when Trump attacked it. His tone had not shifted when the insults got more personal. He did not post a counterattack. He did not call a press conference to announce that he was winning. He just kept saying the same thing he had always said, in the same voice, on the same platform. That peace is a moral obligation, that human life is not a chess piece, that war has costs that cannot be hidden behind strategic language. And paradoxically, every attack made that message louder. Every insult amplified the contrast. Every truth, social post reminding people that the Pope was weak on crime reminded them that what the Pope had actually said was blessed are the peacemakers, and forced them to decide which version of strength they recognized as real. The Bible in the middle. There is an irony here that is almost too obvious to state, but it keeps coming back because it refuses to stay quiet. Donald Trump has called the Bible his favorite book. He sold a Trump-branded presidential Bible during his campaign, manufactured in China, priced at $60, featuring the Constitution and the Bill of Rights alongside Scripture. He held a Bible in front of St. John's Episcopal Church after protesters were cleared from Lafayette Square with tear gas. He has wrapped himself in the language of faith at every political moment where it seemed useful. And now he was calling the head of the church that produced that Bible terrible, weak, liberal, a bad appointment. The Pope, meanwhile, quoted the Sermon on the Mount on Easter Sunday and got called soft on crime for it. There is no clean way to resolve that contradiction. The people watching it happening in real time had to find their own way through it. And the fact that over 50 million American Catholics were among them meant the conversations being had were not just political. They were personal. They were happening in confessionals and at kitchen tables and in the pause between Sunday Mass and the drive home. Can you support both? Can you hold both identities, the political and the spiritual, without them pulling apart under the tension of this specific moment? That question did not have an easy answer. And the fact that neither side showed any sign of stepping back meant the question was going to keep circling. What the escalation actually reveals. By the time Trump doubled down in person, speaking to reporters, posting AI-generated imagery that framed him in near-messianic visual language, the story had moved past the original exchange and into something larger. This was no longer just a fight between two individuals. It was a live demonstration of two different operating systems for global leadership, running simultaneously, in public, with billions of people watching. One system treats every challenge as a battle to be won immediately and visibly. The other treats every challenge as a signal to return, even louder, to the core message. One system needs constant forward motion to survive, new enemies, new targets, new narratives that justify the aggression of the moment before. The other system needs only the same consistent idea, repeated until the world understands that it isn't going to change. And what makes this particular collision so significant is the timing. The war in Iran, the rising international tensions, the growing debate inside American politics about what global leadership should look like in a world that is genuinely frightened about where things are heading. In that environment, the question of whose voice deserves the most weight, the loudest one or the steadiest one, stops being abstract. It becomes urgent. The question that doesn't go away. Does this administration stand to gain from picking a fight with the very popular leader of 1.5 billion Catholics? The answer, as one analyst put it plainly on air, was not much. But that was never really the point. The point was attention. The point was energy. The point was the same thing the point has always been. Keeping the narrative moving, keeping opponents reacting, keeping the base engaged with the feeling that their leader is fighting every battle on every front, even the sacred ones. And for a while, that strategy works. But Pope Leo XIII is not running against anyone. He cannot be out-campaigned. He cannot be primary challenged or outspent or outposted. He simply continues doing the same thing he was doing before the first attack landed, standing at the oldest pulpit in the Western world, quoting the Sermon on the Mount, and repeating in that steady, unhurried voice, "Blessed are the peacemakers." That line was 2,000 years old before either of these men was born. It will be 2,000 years older when they are gone. And the contrast between a leader who treats every moment as a fight to be won and a leader who treats every moment as an opportunity to repeat the same moral truth, that contrast is not going anywhere either. It is just getting clearer.